What's up, everybody? This is Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner, and today I'm going to review a speaker that I really, truly love. It is the Kef LS50 Wireless II. So this is the LS50 wireless speaker with the Meta technology built in, and there's a lot of information about the Meta, and honestly, I don't want to rehash the same thing and waste both of our time, so I'm going to go ahead and get on with my review, and you can Google all the other fancy Meta technology if you want to on your own dime. The reason that I really like this speaker is it does sound great. It sounds really wonderful, in fact, but it's limited. So you've got to kind of keep that in mind, and we're going to talk about that. But the combination of the sound quality from maybe like 100 hertz, maybe 80 hertz and up at higher volume, combined with the fact that it's just so darn easy to use. You just take one power cord and you plug it in the wall, because this thing, even though it says wireless, it still needs power, right? It's not Tesla coil driven or anything like that. But anyway, yeah, you just plug it into a wall and you roll. I can use my phone. I can stream stuff directly from my phone straight to the speakers, sit on my couch and listen. I don't have to worry about going and plugging things on and having different remotes to power different things on and controlling the volume from different stuff. You can do it all from the app, the Kef Connect app. And the other thing is this speaker has a lot of different options. So it has the option to control, positioning. So if you want to set it on a desk or on a table against a wall or something like that, you can control that via its built-in DSP presets that you're able to kind of make adjustments with on the slider. The other thing is that you can control the treble tilt. You can control the bass extension to whatever you want it to be. So you can give it a little bit more bass or take some off of it if you want to, depending on your room. Let's see what else is there. You can stream Spotify. I think it has Tidal. It has a lot of stuff built in. It has a RJ45 Ethernet connection on the back. It's just a bunch of different stuff. Bluetooth. I was using my iPhone and streaming things off of Apple Music because that's what I used through AirPlane. So just streaming straight up onto it. I was sitting anywhere from about 2 to 4 meters. And here's the deal. Here's where this speaker does not meet demands for me for full range. And that's it. It's in full range because it's a 5.25 inch mid-woofer concentric design. So naturally it's going to be somewhat bass limited. I mean, right? You would just kind of expect that going into it. It's not going to give you 20 hertz. It's just not really feasible to expect that. When listening at 4 meters and trying to get to about, 90 dB and kind of rock out, well, that's kind of it. That's actually about the loudest that I was able to take the speaker. But if you're moving closer to it and you're maybe within 3 meters or 2 meters or closer to near field, you won't have any problems with output. It's plenty capable of that, but it's just, you run into issues when you're sitting far away. And that's one thing I wish were better about the speaker. But again, looking at it, you know that, hey, it's probably going to be bass limited. Yes, it is. That said, it does get down to in the 50 hertz region. It's just doing it with a lot of output volume does not happen because it has a built-in limiter to protect the woofer. And that's when you start running into, it's not going to get loud enough if you're kind of if you really just like to bang on stuff, right? Like I do. I mean, sometimes I like to really crank it up and just see what a speaker could do. And that's part of being a reviewer, because not everybody listens at 70 dB. Not everybody listens at 100 dB, so I try to test it out at all sorts of volumes. And with that said, low volumes, no problems. I mean, very good dynamic range, phase coherency on the speaker, which is actually a setting, but that's not what I'm talking about. But the actual coherency, the sound of highs and mids coming together as one is perfect. The focus and the imaging is superb on this speaker. And you just take those attributes. I mean, the tonality is really quite good. Now, there's a dip around the 1 to 3 kilohertz region. It's about maybe 2 dB deep, if that. We'll pull that up in the data in a little bit. If you have an external EQ, I have one on my app. I just bump that up a little bit. You can hear the difference. Now, whether or not you want that dip to be there, that's up to you. I found that when I bumped 2K up by about 1.5 dB, I liked it a little bit more. But if you do more than that, it really kind of mucks up the sound, at least for me. So just kind of keep that in mind. But yeah, just when I got these out, I loved them. I mean, they're just gorgeous looking speakers. They are as much a lifestyle speaker as they are a hi-fi speaker. I think they really converge quite well on those two attributes. I set the speakers up. I pulled up the app. I set the speaker up, within the app to my wireless network. Had it playing music within a couple minutes. sat down and was just rocking out, control everything from my phone, shut my eyes and just listen. I don't have to worry about, hey, I gotta go reach for this remote, or I got to train my hand to remember where the volume up and down is. I just use my phone up, down, on the side, done, right? Super, super easy. And to me, that really feeds into the whole experience, right? If maybe speaking just for myself, but maybe not. If I'm having to do other things while I'm wanting to listen to speakers, you know, if I'm really intent on sitting down and just listening to some of my favorite songs, if I have to go look for a remote, or I'm having to try to remember to do this, or look visually at an indicator to see if something is playing right, it just takes me out of that element. And with these being wireless, I didn't have to worry about that. I set them up on the stands and just sat back and enjoyed the music. And it was really, really great for that. These retail about $2,700 or $2,800, which, ouch, that hurts. Could I afford that? No. Would I spend that much money? Probably not. But I'd say if you're here watching this review, you are probably interested already and you're aware of what the price is. And if you're looking for a recommendation from somebody, I have no problem recommending them if you are willing to spend that much money, because to me, again, it's as much a lifestyle speaker as it is a hi-fi speaker. I would recommend that if you are going to be listening at far distances and you want to get high output, you are absolutely going to need a subwoofer. There is limiting built into the speaker, which shelves off the low frequency response, and the actual output capability of the speaker is also limited. So like I said, I was about limited to 90 dB or so at about 4 meters for the pair of speakers. That was the highest I could get the speakers to play through AirPlay, listening through my phone, streaming music directly to it. Max output was about 90 dB, give or take. So just keep that in mind. I think if you're within like the 2 meter to 3 meter, it's okay. Probably still going to want a subwoofer to pick up the low frequency, but it does get down to 50 hertz at moderate volume quite well. It really doesn't have a problem doing that. But it's just one of those speakers I think you're going to have to understand what you're getting into before you buy it. Don't go into it thinking that, you know, yeah, it goes down to 50 hertz even at full tilt. Well, it doesn't, because it has a limiter built in. So even when you crank it full tilt, well, that starts knocking off some of the low end so you don't overdrive the speakers. Keep that in mind. Let's see, anything else here that I really liked about the speaker? As I said, the imaging focus within the soundstage was impeccable. I absolutely loved it. I really had no qualms, no issues at all with the speaker, again, other than just being related to output and low frequency output. If I bought the speaker expecting a whole lot of that, that would be my own fault. I'd be the dummy, okay? So I can't fault the speaker for doing probably what exactly it was designed to do. And that was to deliver good output, good tonality, linear response, overall great sound, in my opinion. At moderate volume, not rocking out and scare your neighbors 2 blocks away volumes. It's not going to do that, okay? Let's go ahead and look at some of the data. But first, here's a picture of the speaker on the clipple stand. You can see this little, and here on the back, we have the port, and you can see the heat sink for the amplifier. And I think I forgot to mention this, but it probably should be known that this speaker is fully amplified. It's powered, you know, it's all contained in one box. And again, all you need is just power cords. You could choose, if you wanted to run HDMI into it. It's eARC HDMI, optical, coax, auxiliary. There's a sub output. And the cool thing is there's actually a sub output on both speakers. So you can run a subwoofer mono output, or you can run 2 subwoofers, one from each side. And that's really cool. And you can control this all within the app. You can control the crossover, the subwoofer level. It just makes it super, super easy. And here's a spiel where I go on about I'm using Klippel's near field scanner. It is a state-of-the-art robotic system that allows you to measure a speaker and get anechoic data, which is the response of the speaker itself without the room's influence, while doing so in a non-anechoic environment, such as my garage. Very, very noisy, reflection-based. You know, it's a standard garage. And using the near field scanner will allow me to remove all reflections from the result and give us anechoic data better than actual anechoic chambers will. That's pretty neat. As I said earlier, this speaker comes with a lot of settings. Out of the box, there are none that are enabled, such as, you know, the wall, the boundary reinforcement settings, subwoofer output, treble tilt, none of that. It's all just kind of wiped. The bass setting is set for standard. And according to Kef's literature, they actually assumed that most people are going to set it to extra. So that's what I did. I put the bass down to extra, but then I ran it pretty much as default other than that. And I have a picture of, what I'm talking about here. So there is no treble trim. Phase correction is set on, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Bass extension is extra, and subwoofer output is set to none. The reference plane is at the tweeter / mid-range. I did do some extra testing, and I'll talk about that later, but really what I want to hammer home right now is all the results you're about to see are with the default settings, except for the bass extension mode, which is set to extra. And if you're curious what all these measurements mean, you don't know, I'm going to drop a card right here. Go check that out. It's a series of videos that I've done telling you what measurements mean. And here we have the results for the CEA 2034 measurements. The black line on axis response is pretty linear, except through this 1 to 3 kilohertz region. I'm not really sure what's driving this dip, but it's about on average, maybe about a dB down or so. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But looking at the rest of the results, I mean, things look pretty good. Now, I see this, and this indicates a resonance of some sort. Now, I didn't take the time to measure the port output like I normally do in the near field just to see what contribution there is either from the port or from the enclosure. I gotta say that I didn't really hear any resonance itself. So if that's not resonance, it could just be some sort of diffraction effect. But really with all the work that Kef went into with this speaker, I'd really be surprised if that's diffraction. I think if you took an EQ filter and you brought this up a little bit, maybe right through here somehow, you could do a graphic EQ or a couple well-placed parametric EQ bands would work as well. Then we look at the directivity indices measurements. The directivity index, they all look pretty good. I mean, the early reflections as well as the sound power. Again, you see this kind of dip through this 1 to 2 kilohertz region, and makes you wonder. Like, I'm not necessarily sure what's going on with that without really getting into root cause analysis, which is just something that I'm not interested in doing. And I got to say that even seeing this data here and going back and intentionally listening for it, I didn't see a real big issue through here. The only problem that I had was that I just preferred a little bit more in that 1 to 3 kilohertz region. I just took an EQ, bumped it up a little bit, good to go. It helped with the presence. And then too much was just way too forward sounding. And when I say too much, I mean even 2.5 dB was still too much. So it was about like 1.5 to maybe 2, somewhere in there is kind of a sweet spot. So pay attention to that, okay? When you get to the high frequency area, though, you start having a plateau through here. So this means that the directivity is going to be constant through the tweeter. So while it is narrowing up through the mid-range, the mid-woofer area, as it meets the tweeter right through here, it flattens out right here. So the directivity starts to narrow and then stays constant above about 3 kilohertz. This is the horizontal radiation pattern. This is taken with Klippel's output data, and I built a MATLAB script that will allow me to plot it out in a globe type plot. And I just like this format because it helps you visualize, at least to me more intuitively, how the radiation pattern of the speaker behaves. And this is a bird's eye view of it. So top down, and you're looking out on the speaker as it plays out into the room. So you might have a wall over here and a wall over here, and this is going toward you. The red indicates the main radiation pattern area. And what I really like about the speaker is that I would say it's a bit wider than what I'm used to, at least through the mid-range area and meeting the tweeter. And real facts, actually, let me just double check something. Yeah, now we're looking at Kef's R5, and you can see that this is actually quite different. Even though it's another Kef speaker, it's very different. Now that R5 has dual woofers above and below the concentric driver, but we can see that it just doesn't look as smooth. You've got some kind of jaggies going on here and some weird stuff going on, some discontinuities and whatnot. But if we go back to the LS50, what you see is just smoother overall. It really kind of rides along this constant radiation. It gets broader right around this 1.3 and, well, maybe 1.6. And that's that area of resonance, that kind of sticks out a little bit more. If we go to the vertical response, this looks pretty good as well. You can see that there is a little bit of a discrepancy or discontinuity right through this region around the 3.2 kilohertz area, or maybe even 2 kilohertz area, just dropping through here. But it's really not bad. I mean, you're shifting by about plus or minus 50 to about plus or minus 35 and then 40. So you rebound pretty quick. Vertically, yeah, I would say that it's a pretty good speaker. Now, this is the linearity. Now, if you just take the average SPL You can ignore the actual dB value over here since this is scaled via a template. But you can say that the speaker is mostly plus or minus 1.5 dB, except for this little area around 1.8 kilohertz. So that's a really quite linear speaker. And again, if you wanted to take an EQ and kind of bring this area up, you could do that. Now going down here and looking at the F3 and this extra bass mode, you can see it's 50 hertz. So it reaches down reasonably low. But once it starts falling off, it starts falling off with a quickness. F10 is at 41 hertz. So it's down 10 dB, or it's down another 7 dB and 9 hertz. So when it starts rolling off, it just falls off a cliff. And that's why you're going to need a subwoofer to help you on the low end. Distortion looks like it's kept in check reasonably well. It's not the lowest distortion numbers I've ever seen, but if you follow my discussions with Floyd and Geddes, and I'll link one of those up here in the card, you can see that the common consensus is that distortion really hasn't been attributed yet to a strong factor of our like or dislike of a speaker. And the verdict is really still out on that. I think most of the time what people are hearing is not distortion, it's compression. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you look above about 80, 50, 60 hertz, well, let's just say 50 hertz, you're below 3% THD and then it skyrockets. That's because your frequency response is just falling like a cliff. And this distortion metric is provided in dB. This is relative to the fundamental. And then we go to 96 dB, and that's where we say, oh, interesting. Okay. Distortion starts really rising at this high output. Now, 96 dB for one speaker at 1 meter. If you added another speaker, that would be about another 6 dB in the room. So that's 102 dB at 1 meter. And then room effect give you about another 3 dB. So then you're 105 dB at 1 meter. This is well above the volume level that anybody would listen to at 1 meter. But when you start moving back out into the room at 4 meters, you're probably looking around the 90 dB region, which is exactly where I started maxing out on this speaker. So again, I'm going to say volume-wise, if you're in the far field at about 12 feet or so, I wouldn't expect to be going any louder than 90 dB. If you're closer to the speaker, that's better. And the distortion on the low end, yeah, we can see it's just starting to rise pretty rapidly. Now, I talked about distortion, said that, verdict's still out, not really sure how much it matters, but this is the stuff that I think is important, and this is why I go through the extra effort to provide this. This is the compression testing. It tells you how much SPL you're losing as you increase the volume from 76 dB to 86 or 96 or 102 dB, right? And the 86 dB is marked by the red line. And what we can see here is that for the most part, it's pretty much the exact same output. There's no delta between 76 to 86 dB, except for 50 hertz. You're actually gaining a lot of output, and that's really due to the distortion level. So it's going to sound different because this output level has changed by almost 2 dB at 50 hertz. Another reason why a proper crossover filter is going to be needed here, or moderate listening levels. Just basically don't go crazy on the volume. 96 dB is another interesting story. Now you can see that you're starting to chop off a good bit of response. And this is where the limiter is really kicking in and taking over, and it's protecting the speaker. 102 dB. This is telling you that if you're trying to hit 102 dB, you're not going to get there. 2 dB is taken off the top on the limiter automatically. So at best, you're at 100 dB, and this is at 1 meter. And then if you look below the 200 hertz region, you're losing so much output. Again, because the speaker is trying to protect the woofer, so there's built-in electronics to the speaker that are trying to keep you from overdriving it. And this is the data that I think everybody needs to see and understand about, at least about this speaker, if not every speaker, because it gives you a practical realization of how loud you're going to be able to listen to a speaker. Now, you may be wondering, okay, cool, Erin, what happens if I plug a subwoofer and make a subwoofer channel active out of these speakers? Does that alter the limiter? Let's see. Do I have that? No, I don't have that in here. I did test that. It doesn't change a thing. Turning a crossover or enabling the subwoofer and enabling the crossover, I set it even at 100 hertz. I still had the same trends where I was just chopping data off or output off. So yeah, it's a limiter built into the speaker, designed to protect the speaker. And it doesn't matter if you engage as external subwoofer or not. It's still going to have the same effect on the LS50. Now, is it going to change the output on the external subwoofers? I don't know that. My guess is that it wouldn't, but I did not test the actual pre-outs of the speaker. And if you are thinking, why didn't you do that? How dare you? I did so much. All right. Long-term compression, 86 dB for long-term, not really changing the output. 96 dB, there's something funky going on around here. I think you're hitting a resonance. I think this is another sign of a resonance. Whether it's port or an internal resonance, I'm not sure. But I see this usually when I hit port resonances, I see a dip. So I'm not sure what the dip peak is, but something's going on here. But again, grand scale, it's not really a big deal. At 96 dB, your speaker's probably not really even going to get that loud anyway if you're operating it within its safe limits. As I mentioned before, this speaker has a lot of DSP settings. What happens with the Wireless 2's bass settings? Okay, extra is in black right here. So it's the highest SPL or the lowest frequency. Standard is in red. You can see it rolls off a little bit sooner, and less is in the blue, and you can see it still rolls off a little bit sooner than that. Treble trim. I set this from 0 dB in black to plus 3 dB in blue, and then minus 3 dB in red. And I think the bone stock setting with 0 dB is probably going to be the way to go. You can play around with knocking it down. I think I wound up settling on like half a dB, but that could change from morning to night. So I would mess around with that. And the cool thing is it's on your app. You've got it ready to go and you can see what you want to do with it. Now, Kef has this phase correction ability where you can phase align the drivers at the crossover point, which I really think is just time aligning the speakers. And they actually say in their write-up, in their white paper about, I'm pretty sure I'm going to paraphrase this, okay, that there is no change in the crossover or in the magnitude. And even some people may not notice the phase correction on-off event, toggle on-off. You may not even hear a difference, but they've added it there anyway. So I thought, well, why not measure it? So I measured it, frequency response, exactly the same. I'm not wasting my time or your time by even providing that in my data. It's the exact same. I mean, down to the 10th of a decibel. Okay. It's the exact same, but the phase correction does make a difference in terms of timing. If we follow the phase correction off line in black, in the step response, we start off with the tweeter here, dips down, and here comes the midwoofer. In blue, tweeter, very small dip, midwoofer. So these two right here are practically sitting on top of each other for all intents and purposes. I mean, you would have to be another, like 10th of a millisecond off. And normally when I mess around with time delay for active speakers, you can clearly hear a difference. Even when you're talking high frequency, even if you're talking about a 10th of a not dB, but 10th of a millisecond, you can hear a little bit of a Doppler shift when you're altering the time delay on a tweeter or a mid-range versus a tweeter. You can hear that intensity trading. You can really more or less hear the comb filter pattern. That's really what you're hearing. With this speaker, I couldn't hear a difference, and I'm quite certain that the reason is not because I can't hear a difference in time delay. I absolutely can. It's because the settings between these two are made so that there is no change to the response curve. Meaning that normally when you add delay to a speaker, if you just take a normal, regular old speaker, you've got pre-built crossovers already, and then you add delay to one of them. Well, it's going to shift the phase at that crossover region, and you're usually going to wind up with either a dip or a peak or some kind of dip peak combination at that crossover point because the phase isn't exactly aligned, right? But with a speaker like this, where everything is done internally DSP, you push that little button, you go to phase correction on, everything is time aligned, but there is no shift in the response because that phase is already taken into account as well. Or conversely, I could say that the phase correction off is built so well that even though it's not time aligned perfectly, it still is well maintained, or phase is well maintained at the crossover region. And that's why I believe I didn't hear a difference alternating between the two, even with peak noise. And again, I always hear that difference when I'm building an active system. So it's not an issue of whether I can or can't. It's just that I couldn't with this design because the phase correction didn't really seem to change, right? I mean, it's already so well built without the additional time delay on the tweeter that I didn't notice a difference. And that's a good thing. But the cool thing is it's there if you want to listen for it. You can toggle it on and off very easily. Now, this is some other testing that I'd run with the desk and the wall modes, and this is just a sample. So the baseline is with desk and wall modes off, and that's in black. The blue line is with the desk mode set to -3 dB, and that's right here. And then red is the wall mode set to -3 dB. So that's just boundary reinforcement. And you can see or get a general idea of what those different settings will allow you to do. And yes, you can run those concurrently at the same time. And that's really it for this review. It's a little bit long-winded. I apologize for that, but I really think it's important to really keep hashing over some of those points about output limitation. But it's important to understand the design and what the intended use is. A speaker like this, it's not designed to take the place of your buddy's Servo Vegas from 1991. That's not the purpose of the speaker at all. Within their limits, they are certainly a great speaker. I would say about 80 to 85 dB at 4 meters. If you want to go louder than that, just move your butt closer to the speakers. Because the limiter kicks in pretty significantly at higher output volumes, it's just not capable of getting very, very, very loud. 90 dB at 4 meters is still quite loud, especially for extended. So don't get the wrong impression that these can't get loud at all. It's just that these are not meant for very, very high output for like maybe movies and things like that that you might otherwise try to use them for at far listening distances where you have a big screen in front of you. You know, you're not going to have a 130-inch screen and these parked 15 feet away from you and trying to get 95 dB out of them. That's just not going to happen. So keep that in mind. With those caveats laid in place, again, this really currently right now to this day, and these things always change, is one of my favorite speakers. It sounds great. It has a lot of options, a plethora of options that you can control. And I just like the fact that it's wireless. I can just run everything from my phone. I don't have to worry about, you know, having to turn multiple pieces of gear on to just listen to music. And that really allows you to kind of turn the lights off and just sit and listen to some good tunes in a way that maybe you haven't gotten to do in a while. And for that reason, I will recommend them. I do want to shout out all of my patrons for the support, especially the fellow who sent me this speaker to let me test it, and I will be sending it to him shortly. And also, I'll say that if you do plan on buying the speaker, if you like it, if you're interested, I'll have an Amazon affiliate link on my description below, and I welcome you to use that. It gives me a small contribution or small commission at no additional cost to you, and that's how I keep the lights on around here. If you don't want to buy through the Amazon affiliate link, that's fine too. I would suggest that you buy from somebody who you can return it to just in case you get it and it maybe doesn't suit you well or doesn't get loud enough for you. But I think most people, you know, looking at the speaker kind of understand what they're getting into. Again, for the price, it's not something that I can afford, but I have no problem recommending it if it's something you're interested in and on the fence about. And with that said, I am out. I will talk to you later. Take care. Peace.